welcome back to Slightly Less Scripted. We are here with a guest for the first time outside of the Catholic Central community, Chris Rizik. He is the CEO of Renaissance Venture Capital, and he is also the owner and founder of one of the largest, or the largest R&B music websites in the world, soultracks.com.
Right. Great to be here, Stephen.
Welcome. Thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here.
What'd you think of the campus driving in? I know you haven't been here in a minute.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I hadn't been here since pre-COVID, and the science building wasn't up yet. It's amazing. I mean, it really feels like a college campus here. Just beautiful. And just, you can just sense the joy around the place.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that are excited to come to work every day. I think when you, I always tell people, when I drive by the Blue Angel, it's kind of hard to not get excited about your work day ahead of you.
Right, right.
So we are here on our service day today, and our kids were participating in some acts of service, and we were walking the halls and kind of seeing all the different projects going on. So I think it's just it's a cool place to be around for sure.
Oh yeah, I can see that.
So let's get into a little bit about you and your background. So obviously you guys are Lebanese background descent.
Right. That's right.
So, and your father actually was born in Lebanon, correct?
All four grandparents were born over there.
Okay.
But my parents were both born here.
Here. So your grandparents came over to the States.
That's right.
Why did they leave Lebanon?
I think it was for opportunity.
Okay. So same as kind of
everybody who came in the early 1900s, right?
And then you guys originated kind of up in Flint?
That's right. Yeah, my mom was from St. Louis. My dad was from Flint. When they got married, she moved to Flint, and then they just started having kids.
Cool. And what kind of, in terms of your guys' background, what would you guys do kind of like for work growing up? What did the parents do?
My dad was an accountant and ran an accounting business up in Flint. My mom was by training a nurse and an opera singer, but she gave up both when she started having kids, and they got married late in life. They were both in their 30s, and then they had 7 kids after that, sort of one a year pretty much. And so my mom stayed home for years. Interestingly, she went back to work at age 70 and then worked for 30 years after that. She died at 101 just a couple of years ago, and she worked until 5 days before she died, full time.
Wow, so she was even strong at 100.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, she worked a full career after age 70.
That really strong genes. Your family reminds me of my mom's family, she has 10 siblings in total, and grandpa and grandma both lived super long and probably were not working a real job, but working until the day they passed.
Right.
Strong people.
Right.
That's amazing.
And classically trained opera singer as well.
That's right.
So is there a lot of singing going on in the household?
Yes. But when she had 6 boys, and when you have 6 boys, man, and you've got all these opera albums, they don't last well. We actually use them. We would play hockey in the house and use her opera albums as the boards.
Would you say that her passion of music is what got you into music a little bit?
Yeah. I mean, I think in all of us, we all have very strong musical love, I think, because of her.
I think that's a good segue then into kind of Soul Tracks. And how did that get started?
So when I was an undergrad at Michigan State, I wanted to write about music. And so I became, they have the State News, which is a pretty big student newspaper there. And the type of music I loved most, although I loved lots of music, was R&B or soul music. And they had never had a reviewer who reviewed soul music. So I talked to the editor, got a position there writing about soul music, and did it for my entire time at Michigan State. And then kind of had a career decision. Do I want to go into professional music journalism, or do I want to continue on the path of becoming a CPA? Pretty different paths. And I'm pretty sure I chose the right one. I wasn't that great of a music writer, and that was a tougher world. So I got my CPA and practiced that, and we can talk about my career later. But I still had that itch for music. And then when the internet came in the early 2000s, I decided I wanted to start writing about music again. So I wrote a couple articles just for fun, and then contacted out of the blue by Sirius XM Radio. They liked my writing and asked me if I wanted to do a show on Sirius. So I did. Wasn't really fun. What I really wanted to do was write, but I used that as sort of the kickoff point to learn how to build a website and just start writing reviews. I was doing a lot of flying then, so writing it on planes, writing it on weekends, and one thing led to another, and soon I started to get a bit of a following, and then decided, okay, I'm in venture capital. I should be able to turn this into something. And so I started bringing in writers, and one thing led to another. And, over the course of years, we've grown into something pretty special. And for soul music lovers around the world, we're kind of like the first place they go to look, to find out about new music or to see reviews.
So really it started as a passion project that turned into something down the line.
Yeah, it's still largely a passion project. I mean, I have my day job, which we'll talk about. This is what I do while watching the Lions on Sunday afternoon or nights or whatever. And it's just because I love the music and I love being able to listen to new music.
I love that, finding a way to keep, one of your hobbies, one of your passions alive in your life, but make it like productive and work for you. I mean, that's how I feel about esports sometimes. Like I've never thought in a million years I would be able to keep it as a part of my daily routine, but I found a way to make it work.
Yeah, that's great.
Which is similar to you. So
yeah.
So what's that process like? Do you get music early? Do you spend a week with it, a day with it? How are you formulating your thoughts? Share with me a little bit about how something comes to you across your desk and then how it ends up on your website.
Yeah, it's pretty high volume. So there isn't a ton of thinking that goes on in the screening process. We get about probably 30 to 40 submissions a day.
Wow.
And some of them are clearly not in the genre, but of those that could arguably be, somebody's got to listen to it and decide, is this appropriate for our audience? And we kind of know a sound we're looking for. We're not hip hop, we're not pop, and we don't review music that has a lot of swearing in it.
Mm-hmm.
So that eliminates a fair bit. And then I have a music editor, and she and I sort of split it up, and we just review it. So of those 40 submissions we might get in a day, we might decide to review one or two of them. That's probably about it. And it's got to be, so the bar is pretty high for us to cover it. And then fortunately, I have these writers around the world, staff writers, and then the process is just, okay, here's the information on the artist, here's the song, pretty quick review. Interestingly, in the passage of time, because people are reading on their phones now, 80% of our readers are on their phone, articles have had to get shorter.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody wants to read 1,000 words.
Attention spans are just
and
way
nobody wants to read 1,000 words on their phone. So we sort of have made them crisper, shorter, but it is a music discovery site. You wouldn't have heard of this song because it's not going to be on terrestrial radio.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to hear a song for the first time, and then hopefully once we break the song, then it starts getting picked up on internet radio and on the streaming services. And ultimately, at this point in where we're at with music for the artists, it's really about touring, because they were kind of far out in the long tail of music. They're not going to make a lot of money from streaming.
Mm-hmm.
And so their career is really all about performing live. But if people know their music, they're going to be able to become touring artists.
Sell more tickets.
Yeah. And obviously, like, in the same way I am, a lot of them are doing this nights and weekends. They've got day jobs because it's a tough industry to be in right now.
Of course. Who are some of your all-time inspirations in the R&B soul world? Like, who are some of the artists that really just got you into the genre, that inspired you, and maybe who are some of the people that you're listening to nowadays?
Yeah, I mean, historically, growing up here in the Detroit area, everything Motown.
Of course, Hitsville, right?
That's right. And that really was, when I was being the youngest of 7, I sort of gravitated to whatever my older siblings were listening to. And that really was Motown, back when I was growing up in the 70s. And so they were really the inspirations, all those artists at Motown. Interestingly, each year we do at Soul Tracks a Lifetime Achievement Award. This year's winners, actually, I'm saying this now, it hasn't even been publicly announced, but I'll tell you. It's Brian and Eddie Holland, who were the writers who wrote many of the big Motown hits. I had a chance to meet them about a month ago at a Motown museum event. And so we're giving them the Lifetime Achievement. So that really goes back to the inspiration for the site was largely Motown. If you get to artists today, Gosh, there are so many good ones. I would say when people ask me, like, give me the spectrum of what you cover, 3 artists I would name. One would be a guy named Gregory Porter. He's sort of on the jazzy end of soul. He's actually grown into a pretty big artist. First time I saw him, he was playing a 50-person club in Grosse Pointe, the Dirty Dog Jazz Cafe.
Cool.
And now he's grown into something, big around the world, and he's won a couple Grammys. Second one would be a British group called Mama's Gun. And it's sort of a traditional group, and there aren't many R&B bands anymore. And they're a band, and they sort of border between pop and R&B, and really great songwriting. And then the third one I'd say is a guy named Eric Roberson, who in the indie soul world is kind of like the king of indie soul, but he brings in sort of the hip hop influence, but it's not hip hop. And so that's kind of like the spread of the type of things we cover. And we cover some gospel crossover soul and some jazz crossover soul.
Incredible.
So you started in kind of the .com boom era of making websites. You've lived now through the social media era, and now we're going forward into kind of this AI boom. How has that impacted kind of the industry, the website?
I would say the AI impact has crashed onto us just in the past 6 to 8 weeks, literally. We did a story a couple of weeks ago. We had an artist submitted to us, really talented artist, good music, was getting played on radio stations around the world. As I got it and I reviewed it, there just was something not quite right. Even though I saw the backstory, this woman grew up in Connecticut and all that, there's something in tech, and it's called the uncanny valley.
Yes, yes.
And so as I looked at the pictures, it was kind of in that she looked real, but like not quite.
You could tell.
Yeah. And so I just started doing some digging, and one thing led to another. And there's a story on our site which says the artist we fell for turned out to be AI. And that's what happened. So this artist was submitted with this backstory and all that. And the more I dug, ultimately I figured out that she was an AI product, and completely music, lyrics, performance, everything was AI, including the photo. And so we wrote this article about it. And it was actually, ours was one of the first sort of real articles about what was happening with AI in a practical space in music. And now since then, even in the last 2 weeks, Wall Street Journal just wrote about it, New York Times just wrote about it, but ours was one of the first. And it was like, where does this take us in music, where this really good song we received was completely AI performed and written. And where do we go? Where do musicians go? How do they compete with this? Especially when you think about what it takes to put together a song. It takes a lot. And you get all the studio musicians to think that somebody can sort of program this. I won't say it's free, but it's pretty close to free to use Suno and create songs. We were talking a little earlier. There was an article in Billboard yesterday that said the number of AI songs on Suno produced each month equals the total number of songs on Spotify, which is which is crazy. Yeah. So it's really changing things. And now, as I look at the submissions we get of new artists, not artists we're familiar with, I would say probably 20-25% of the new artists we get, I believe, are AI.
And on First Pass, just listening to it for the first time, could you tell?
No.
So First Pass was nothing, but then after the second, third, you start to notice some things.
The really interesting thing is on First Pass, when you were listening to so many songs, human nature is if something has a good melody and has kind of a familiar feel, you tend to gravitate toward it. And when these AI songs are being trained on the greatest music ever, of course they're going to sound familiar. And of course they're going to sound good. They don't push any boundaries, but they sound good. So in some ways, because they're so well performed and so well trained, I would say on first listen, they are at least as good, probably better than most of the stuff we receive.
Wow. And it's not until that second listen that you realize, like, maybe this is almost too good to be true. I'm guessing it's pretty hard to have such a compelling backstory along with fake images and fake songs that, like, at some point, you're going to find the needle in the haystack where, oh, that part doesn't match up.
Yeah, I'd like to think so. I mean, it takes a lot more work because we have to do research beyond the song itself to figure out if it's AI generated, especially if the artist or whoever's submitting it is not being truthful with us.
I think that's one of the craziest stories I've ever heard.
Yeah.
So what is the official stance of your platform, your website, when it comes to AI artists? Are you promoting them in a separate category? Have you made the decision to only promote human works of art? Where do you stand?
When we wrote the article, it caused quite an uproar, particularly among artists. There was a bit of the sky is falling because they saw their whole life's work now possibly being diverted.
Mm-hmm.
And so within 3 days of the article, we created a policy. The policy is we are a vocal music site. So at a minimum, the lead vocals have to be human. We also say we would like a majority of the music performed to be human, so the actual instruments to be human. Understanding AI is going to be used for sweetening a song or for editing and all that. There's no way for us to be able to judge or validate whether the song writing itself is AI. There's no way to figure that out. We're sort of relying on it, but it will be that that really the singer in particular has to be human. I expect, particularly we talked about the economics of music being so tough on artists. If you're an independent artist, you want to create a song, you can go into the studio and create, and it's probably going to cost you a couple $1,000s. Musicians, there certainly will be a temptation to use this technology shortcut, especially when you're not really making money on recorded music. I believe that temptation is going to be there and it's going to be strong. I don't know where it leads, but I think it's not going to get easier. It's just going to get more difficult.
For certain, yeah. Many artists, they're paying hourly rates in studios, and it could be the difference between me cutting 3 songs over a weekend, if I have a day job during the week, or finishing an entire album if I'm cutting corners using AI. So I think you're absolutely spot on. It's going to become more and more prevalent.
Yeah, one of the red flags we see, if we see an artist that's new, I will go look on Spotify and you'll see this artist has released 72 songs this year. It's kind of a giveaway.
Yeah.
And all the artwork is like that weird AI generated artwork. Yeah.
You said something very interesting though. It doesn't push any boundaries.
Yeah.
And that's one of my favorite things about music is when you hear something new and fresh. And so I hope, maybe this is the romantic in me, but I hope that human element of always pushing boundaries will promote human performance and will continue to elevate music forward.
I hope so. There are only so many Princes or Stevie Wonders and everybody else follows.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think those who are truly pushing boundaries will continue to push boundaries. I fear AI will be a fast follower though.
Mm-hmm. Well said.
And then amazingly, this is only kind of one thing of your life. The other thing that you do kind of for your day job is being the CEO of Renaissance Venture Capital. I guess we have some students that watch the podcast. Let's start with what exactly is venture capital? I've heard it kind of, quite a bit in my lifetime in terms of, this VC buys this company or so on and so forth. And really that's kind of the context that I know it in is there's these firms that exist that buy up other firms, but I don't really know much, past that.
Yeah. So if you think about it, what venture capital is fundamentally is investment in startup companies that have created a technology or a service or something that can really be kind of world changing.
Mm-hmm.
So everybody's seen Shark Tank.
Yes.
And it's kind of, sort of like that. I mean, it is investors and they're investing in interesting companies, but it's not like Shark Tank in a lot of ways. The way it works isn't like Shark Tank. So basically, you've got founders who are creating companies that they think can fundamentally change
the world,
change an industry. And quite often, in order to develop that company and develop that technology, it takes millions of dollars where they're not going to be profitable for a long time. You can't go to a bank
You wouldn't be able to go to a bank and get
That's
$10 million.
So how do you do it? That's where venture capital comes in. And interestingly, as a formal industry, it's only about 50 years old.
Mhm.
But if you look at the impact it's had on that, if you look at the 10 largest companies in the world right now, 8 of them had venture capital in the last 50 years. So your Googles, your Microsofts, all of those, Facebook or Meta, all of them, they all had periods where they had an idea, but they needed millions of dollars of very, very high risk money
Sure.
in order to develop it. And that's the other part. You can invest in Microsoft now and feel pretty good that it's a safe bet. It's going to go up or down a little bit. In venture capitalists invest knowing a third to half of their investments are going to completely wash out and be zero.
Within like 6 months or something, right?
It takes longer than that. Yeah. But the hope is that the ones that connect, that hit, make up for all the mistakes. So
they 1,000x or they 2,000x.
In my career, probably the one that has stood out for me has been we invested very early on in the people who founded Moderna. That was a once in a career type situation where we were literally investing in people who founded it in their office, and the company went on to be worth over $100 billion. I mean, that was an amazing thing to ride. It was amazing to ride it from a financial standpoint, also from the standpoint of them coming up with, the first vaccine for COVID. And I was, at that point, we had been investors in Moderna for 9 years. So it wasn't a brand new company. It had been around kind of working on their technology. I was comfortable enough that they were doing clinical trials at the Henry Ford. I went there and volunteered and got the shot during the clinical trials in the summer of 2020.
You're like, I've known this company for 10 years.
Yeah, I felt completely comfortable with that. At that time, it's tough to remember, but we're all trying to figure out, how can we help?
Sure.
How can we help? And the only thing I could do at that point was just put my arm out, right? So that's an example. And the hope is that you can, you pick enough really good companies, but it's not passive. You invest in a company, and when I bought my Apple stock, I just sort of sat back and saw what happened.
Sure.
When you're a venture capitalist, you invest and then you get actively involved with the company. So a typical venture capitalist is probably only looking at any point, or it's only actively investing in about half a dozen companies, because they are there working with the management, helping with strategy. Where most founders, when they start a company, it's the first time they've ever founded a company. If you're a good venture capitalist, you've seen this over and over and over again. And that experience of having seen how do companies grow quickly and well is a value add that you bring when you invest. So you're not just giving money, you're giving help. That is like Shark Tank, where they talk about, Mark Cuban said, yes, real venture capitalists can do that. And they can really be of great help to companies.
So when we talk about VC, we're talking about these are, privately held funds from people that are willing to invest their own dollars into these companies, right? So when we talk about, that company got $10 million, that's coming from, right, a group of people.
Yeah, so a typical VC has to itself go out and fundraise. So, at Renaissance, we've raised about $350 million over the years, but every few years I have to go out and talk to institutions like pension funds or insurance companies or university endowments and ask them to invest in us. And here's what we're going to do with your money. We're going to do all this investing ourselves and then hopefully provide a return. If you think about, let's talk about a university endowment. They've got billions of dollars and they're using that to give scholarships to kids and to pay for things around campus. So it's very important that we provide financial returns to them or to foundations that are using the money to make grants to people. It's really important that this isn't charity. This is a money-making venture that can have a really positive effect on the community, but also is giving returns so that that foundation or endowment can do that. So that's typical venture capital. Renaissance is a little bit different.
Right.
And, we sort of invented a new type of fund. So Renaissance is a fund of funds. So we don't invest in startups. We invest in venture capital funds around the country, under the condition that they come to Michigan and they invest in Michigan startups. So our goal was find the best venture capital funds around the country, most of which have never invested in Michigan, and get them to invest in Michigan. So there is a social impact to what we're doing. Fund of funds had existed before, but not like ours. So we do three things. We get major Michigan companies to invest in us. So companies like DTE, Blue Cross Blue Shield, AAA, et cetera, have invested in us. And then we ask them to not only invest, but to look at becoming customers of the startup companies that may come out of that. So when we go to a venture capital fund on the West Coast, we say, we'll look to invest in you. By the way, we've got all these companies that will look to become customers of the companies that you invest in. And third, we want you to come and look at Michigan startup companies and look to invest in Michigan, and we will help you find great Michigan startups. So if you think about it, we're going out and talking to these venture capital funds on the coasts, largely, who've never been to Michigan. We tell them, we want to invest in you money. We will bring you startups to look at, and we'll bring you corporate customers. And nobody had ever done that before, that combination of things. And so we've been pretty blessed that it's worked, and we've been able to date, we've helped attract about $3 billion of investment into Michigan startups. Michigan, over a 5-year period right around COVID, was the fastest growing state for venture capital. And it's a state that has not traditionally been a venture capital type community. And so we had a lot of impact. Fortunately, we made strong financial returns for our investors. And we had to do some pretty creative things. How do you get a fund from California to come look at Michigan? Well, we do an event called Undemo Day, which has become quite popular. We take over Ford Field with a Lions play in October, and we have all these Michigan startup companies apply to participate. And we had 260, I think, this year. We bring in over 200 venture capitalists, and we essentially run a fantasy draft. So cool. We send out all this information about the startups, and we tell the funds that are going to come in to visit, make your fantasy draft choices. And then we have tables set up all over Ford Field, and we will set up hundreds of sort of speed dating one-on-one meetings. So, okay, this fund from California wanted to talk to this cybersecurity startup from Detroit. You're going to be at table number 2 at 12:15. Be there. And we just run this round robin.
You guys have 5 minutes.
It's actually a little longer. We give them 20 minutes. The goal is that in that 20 minutes, they will learn enough about each other that they want to continue to talk. Yeah. And so there will follow-up meetings. And then hopefully, ultimately, a number of those venture capitalists will invest in companies that they met in Detroit. Yeah. And that's our goal, is to get more capital invested in Michigan. Because if you look around the country, there is a direct correlation between venture capital invested in a region and that region's economic growth. And that's really the goal for it. And we've been pretty blessed. We're this, relatively small fund, but we've received a number of national awards for the innovative model that we created up and the impact that we've had, including this year, we received a national award, the top national award for venture capital. We went to Palo Alto for it, which is really unusual for somebody in the Midwest.
So you guys are actually that, when you spoke about you can't go to the bank and get money, you're actually that group that other VCs will come to for funding in some scenarios, but it's the one caveat, we want you to spend this money back here in Michigan.
Right.
I think that's a very creative idea. In terms of your guys' venture capital firm and the VCs under you, what are the kinds of businesses, the industries that you guys are involved in?
Yeah, it's all over the place. We're trying to have a pretty broad portfolio. You never know, this is a 10-year window, and so you never really know for sure what's going to be hot. So we have a lot of general tech. AI obviously is playing a really big role in venture capital right now. We have a lot of healthcare, biotech, mobilities of, Michigan's really has a strong history in mobility. Mm-hmm. A lot of people don't know Michigan is also known nationally for cybersecurity. That's one of the areas that we're really hot in. Advanced manufacturing, advanced materials. What are new types of materials with properties that can be world changing? So kind of all those areas are areas that we have stakes in, even a little bit of agriculture technology.
So obviously now it's kind of interesting. You brought up AI again. So you've got the one side of you that's creative, passionate about music. That's like, I could see this as a threat to that industry. But then for some of the other industries, healthcare, technology, how are your views on AI when it comes to, the capabilities and powers there?
Yeah, here's an example of where AI can really help. Drug development. We talked about Moderna. It typically takes, for a drug to be fully developed and be done, we're talking well over $1 billion for a single drug to reach that. And part of that process of, determining, sort of what chemical compounds should we look at to address, let's say, a certain type of cancer. There's a lot of trial and error that goes on that, and it's very time consuming. What if you could, in advance, sort of use AI to look at the properties of thousands and thousands of chemical compounds and help you to sort of whittle down, let's try these 100 combinations of chemicals to see if it will address this one type of cancer. AI can speed up that process, we think, and can make it much less expensive, with the result that we will get more effective drugs to people sooner. I'm kind of shortcutting it because there's all kinds of ways to use it all the way throughout the process of discovery. That is an area where AI, I think, will be a game changer and will help provide more life-saving drugs to people much, much quicker.
When you were in high school, did you envision kind of being where you're at today in terms of what you do?
Not at all. Not even close. So I knew I was going to get an accounting degree. I ended up getting the accounting degree, working as a CPA. Then I went back to law school, became a lawyer, and was a practicing lawyer in Detroit for 12 years, fully expecting that's what I was going to do the rest of my career. I will say I was probably a little too entrepreneurial to stay in that. So even when I was a lawyer, I was thinking, is there a way I can get back into music or something like that? And then the venture capital situation arose. I mean, sort of the interesting story is I was working at this law firm, 4 small kids at home, just kind of like no extra time. And I got a call out of the blue out of somebody who I'd worked with as a CPA. It was Rick Snyder, who went on to become the governor of the state. Rick and I had been friends. He was moving. He had been I'm going to date myself a little bit. He was the president of Gateway, which was a computer company, probably too long ago
for him,
you.
But not for me.
Okay,
sounds familiar, but
there was a time when Gateway and Dell were kind of like the 2 big computer companies. Anyway, so Rick had been president of Gateway, wanted to move back to Michigan and start a venture capital fund. And I was the only attorney he knew in town. So he called me and said, hey, moving back to Michigan, I'm going to start this. Can we meet and talk about, I might need a legal help to start this fund. The problem was I didn't know what venture capital was. So literally, we were meeting the next day. I went to a library that night, got a book on venture capital, and read just enough to bluff my way through a meeting the next day. And I did. And he said, great, your firm is hired. And so I started helping with, and venture capital was so new. This is 1998, 1999, something like that. It was so new that there wasn't a lot of experience at all around the state. So, in a short period of time, I was the most experienced, venture capital attorney, probably within 6 months. That's how little was going on here. And then, within a year of us working together on that, he asked me to leave the firm and become his partner. And that was a pretty easy call. Mm-hmm. It was something super entrepreneurial, and it was fascinating to me. And I will give a ton of credit to my wife, Colette, because I had this very secure job at a law firm, and I was going on to something much less secure. And she never wavered for a moment. She was like, absolutely, just do it. And again, we got 4 kids under the age of 10 at the time.
Yeah.
So I did it, and it just opened up a new world for me. And I learned so much, some of it from mistakes for sure. And you're working with Rick for 8 years, gave me the background I needed to start Renaissance in 2008. Really having a lot of scars on my back from the things I had done before, and having a much better vision of what I thought the capability of venture capital to change Michigan was.
I think you have a lot of wisdom and a lot of experience, and I think our kids would find it very interesting. Like, what tips would you give to young guys that are growing up? Because I think we have a lot of guys here that probably envision
a lot of young alumni with startups too.
Yeah, that they want to start their own business, or they want to go out and do. What advice would you give them in terms of what it takes to succeed?
Yeah, there's a few pieces I would put in there. One is, as they're choosing your career, you can't always choose your first job. It just can't. You go to where you can get a job, especially now. But to be thinking throughout your career where you want to be, not necessarily knowing precisely the industry, but what are the qualities you're looking for in a job. So for me, I needed something more entrepreneurial. When I was an attorney, I worked with really great people, and I kind of enjoyed it. The way I would put it is I still push the snooze button every morning when I woke up. Once I moved to venture capital, I've never pushed the snooze button. I can't wait to get up for work. Sometimes I'm scared to death, but it is just, I'm so energized by what I do. And so number one is, to work toward a career where you can find that kind of energy in your daily life. And as you're going through your jobs, it's very easy to get complacent. But I would say, one piece of advice is create optionality for yourself. Take your job, do your best at your job, but always be thinking, what do I ultimately want? And what do I need to do to get there? And it may be like you're going to have to do some stuff at night. You have to do stuff on weekends to get the skills to move to the goal you want to get to. So that's one. Two is, there was a period before I started Renaissance. It was pretty clear, Rick and I had run 2 funds together, and we were kind of winding down the second fund. He didn't want to stay in venture capital. He wasn't quite sure he wanted to run for governor, but he didn't want to make another 10-year commitment to venture capital. So I was sort of in this position where, okay, now what? I don't want to go back and become an attorney again, but I don't know what's next. I ended up at the perpetual adoration room at Our Lady of Victory, just kind of praying like, okay, now what? And so the Renaissance came to me in that perpetual adoration room. And the deal I made with God, because we would just make deals right when we're desperate, was like, if this can work out, I will always take a meeting. I answered your LinkedIn request. It's part of that.
Wow.
I will always take the meeting, not if somebody's trying to sell me something, but if somebody just wants advice or something, because I've had so many good people who help me, and I'm, my career to this point has just been a series of sort of unmerited blessings.
Yeah.
And so that's my agreement with God. And what I found from that is just by doing that kind of thing, it sounds trite to say I get more out of it than the people that I talk to, but I kind of do. And things have a way of coming back around.
Full circle.
Yeah. And so there's that old saying, no good deed ever goes unpunished. I actually flip it around. And at least in my life, no good deed has ever gone unrewarded.
Wow. Just being open to his will, right? And just
100%.
Saying yes in the situation.
100%.
That's profound.
Like, I should not be where I am right now. It doesn't even make sense. And it's just been from grace that, was completely unmerited.
Wow.
That's amazing.
That's a powerful message. And that's one that I think our community would really appreciate, just putting God first and being open to these opportunities, thank you for sharing that.
100%. Yeah, that was amazing. I know that the kids will want me to ask you this, so I'll ask, and you can answer, you cannot answer. But what was one deal that you made where it was kind of it doesn't have to be necessarily you. It could be the fun. But one deal that you guys invested in, it was just, 20x, 30x, 40x, like a really good deal that you guys had made, and kind of the numbers behind it.
Yeah, there's been a few. I mean, Moderna was obviously the big one, but that was sort of, this indirect model that we have now. Back when we had our first fund, we invested in a company called Esperion. It was a drug in Ann Arbor. It was a drug company in Ann Arbor designed to help people with cholesterol problems. And, we invested in it, and it went on to become a leading drug. I think we made 10 times our money on it, which is great. But equally importantly, it was from the same creators of Lipitor, same team. They spun out and created their own company, and it went on to become a really important drug addressing the problem of people with cholesterol.
Yeah. So every good company that makes money, they're providing, almost an invaluable good or service, right? They're not just making that money, right? They're providing something. I mean,
it's like we didn't invest in Foursquare,
sure,
or something. They all have had, I think, some positive impact, whether it is bringing people closer together, making communication easier. The healthcare stuff is really easy to see the value of them. They're all doing something, to address a disease or a condition.
Sure. That's like the best companies. You got to find a problem and come up with the solution for it.
Would you say that that's kind of a pillar of Renaissance, is kind of having some moral fiber, more moral benefit? You mentioned, bringing businesses back to Michigan. I'm certain it would be easier for Renaissance to not have that caveat. But what is the driving factor behind kind of picking companies that you think are going to do the most good, not only in Michigan, but overall?
Yeah, I mean, I think in the end, our first priority is, backing up. When we started Renaissance in 2008, Michigan was in a one-state recession for almost a decade. And that really instigated this. Ultimately, our first goal is to get people really good jobs in Michigan. And, as somebody who's a founder, to get founders who are really putting it out there, putting their career on the line, to give them an opportunity to create something special. And so our first sort of social mission is to help founders in a part of the country that often doesn't help founders. I mean, the whole Midwest and center of the country has always been challenged there. And then two, to help create jobs for people. I mean, the average venture capital backed company pays 50% more than the average job overall. So it really is good middle class earnings, not $10 an hour earnings. And so it is to really create those kind of jobs and create them here in a state that has traditionally kind of had one or two industries that dominated things, and we rode up and down with those industries. And it's been, to be honest, it's been mostly down over the last 20 years.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I think that's really, really amazing stuff about just the background behind the company, the reason for it. I think one last kind of segment that I want to touch on, because you mentioned OLV, and obviously you went to Flint Powers. How has faith kind of made an impact in the way that you do business, the way that you just live your life and carry yourself?
I mean, I hope it has. I've talked about the origins of Renaissance, which is like inextricably tied with faith. But yeah, I mean, my parents were really faithful people, and I had this great upbringing of faithful people. And I can think of the teachers I had in school who, even with a great home life, I had that on top of it. I had these great teachers who really pushed me in my faith, pushed me to try to, beyond what I learned in school, to do extra reading and extra thinking and extra praying and all that. It certainly impacted me as in my work career. If I think everything I do, there is a bit of it that is connecting people who wouldn't otherwise be connected. So whether it's an undemo day where I'm connecting a startup to a venture fund, whether it's Soul Tracks, where I'm connecting this independent artist sitting in Indianapolis with this soul music world that wouldn't otherwise know about him or her. I think if and faith is part of that. Faith has sort of led me through introspection to realize probably the thing that I can do best is this connection work. And that all comes from that.
Yeah. So relationship building is one of your key kind of components to your life, putting pieces together and in different spots and seeing it from a bigger picture.
Right. I mean, so many good things can happen when people are just put together, and so many bad things can happen when we put walls up between us. And we certainly see that in the world right now. So the idea of getting people together who wouldn't otherwise be together, it almost always does something good.
Right. Yeah. I know. I think Charlie Kirk had a good phrase on it, and whether he's controversial for other reasons, but he had a good, when we stop talking to each other, bad things start to happen.
Yeah,
because it's almost like when you sit someone down one-on-one and you kind of break down the barriers of, oh, well, they think that way because they grew up differently than me, or they were raised differently than me, or they were in a different situation entirely. It's almost like you don't know what someone's going through until you kind of really sit down and have a one-on-one with them.
Even if I take someone who has completely opposite political views and we sit down and have lunch, we're going to find out we got about 90% in common in our lives.
Yeah,
right?
most people care about their families. They want a house to live in and some food to eat and stuff like that. At the high level, we're all pretty similar.
That's right. That's right.
I think that's amazing. One last thing that I wanted to touch on, because I know it's part of your life too, but you're also a part of the University of Michigan board for innovation, right?
Right.
I just wanted to touch a little bit on that and kind of how the University of Michigan plays a role in your life.
University of Michigan, which was founded by Father Gabriel Richard. University of Michigan is the #1 public research university in the country with over $2 billion a year of research. And what do you do with that research, right? 20 years ago, a lot of it didn't really go anywhere. I mean, it might be research for the Department of Energy or the Department of Defense or whatever. And then, you'd get this very basic research done and then you hand it off and then you go do the next bit of basic research. And University of Michigan really made a fundamental change in that they wanted their research to get out into the real world. And so whether it is healthcare related, getting new drugs out in the world that can help people, whether it is a lot of cybersecurity stuff I talked about, that came out of U of M research. So how do you take this very early basic research and turn it into applied research and then ultimately into products and services that help the world? And that fundamental change happened about 20 years ago at the University of Michigan. And this, what was then a very small group of like 4 or 5 people, is now something called Innovation Partnerships. It's about 80 people at U of M. And their goal is, how can we get our research out into the world and change the world? I'm fortunate that I've been involved for a while, and now I chair Innovation Partnerships. They have a national advisory board that I chair. And it's really so cool to see these brilliant people doing amazing things. And unlike years ago, now there is a continued path for their amazing things to lead to changes in the world. And so if you look at last year, I think U of M spun out 31 companies out of the university, number two of universities in the country. They did this over $2 billion of research, #2 in the country. And so we've got this great university in our backyard. And then you go an hour away from that, Michigan State is super fast growing, and they're doing great things with research and in startups. And then Wayne State is here, and increasingly Michigan Tech and the UP is doing this. So we've got this great set of universities that have all, again, in the last couple of decades, really focused on making sure that they're not doing research for research. They're doing research to really change the world.
It sounds like to me, I mean, it could be biased because we live here, but it sounds like Michigan is really on the come up of things. I mean, even in terms of, from a esports perspective, Michigan is a huge hub for collegiate and for high school things. And Detroit is changing, and it's changed a lot over the past. I mean, since I've been alive, it looks really, really beautiful now. And it sounds like there's a lot of companies that are coming in to start things up in Michigan.
Yeah, I think if I were a person graduating right now, certainly if I lived here, but even if I didn't, I would look at Michigan in a very special way. And that is, Michigan is an up and coming state. It is also, for those who care about being able to impact their world, you can go to California and you can go to New York and you can stand in line there, or in a place like Detroit or Cleveland or Milwaukee, you have the ability as a young person to really have an amazing impact. Think of what you guys are doing here. You guys are really young guys. Think of the impact you are able to have here in your careers. You don't have to wait to be fourth in line for three other people to retire for you to do it.
Sure.
There are opportunities here for people in their 20s and 30s that you just don't have in other parts of the country.
I think it's super well said. Obviously, you're a busy guy. That was legitimately a great conversation and one that I thoroughly enjoyed. So I think that's the kind of perfect way to wrap it up and let you get back to your busyness.
Well, great. Well, thanks for having me, Stephen. This was really great being with you guys.
Yeah.
Thank
Before
you
we
so
go,
much.
just real quick, feel free to let us know your website and how we can learn more about Renaissance.
Sure. The website is soultracks.com, and that's with CKS at the end, not X. And then Renaissance, you can just Google search Renaissance Venture Capital, or the website is REN, as in Renaissance, V as in venture, C as in capital, F as in fund.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks.